Your go.
Nice. Welcome. So Sid, will I be able to tell whether people are popping into the stream or not?
I hope so.
Okay.
I hope so. Right now we have 0 viewers, it says. It should tell us that.
Up and going, and when someone gets here, I mean, if this is going to be one-way broadcast, then that's going to be difficult. But it didn't sound like it. It sounded like we'd be able to.
Right. What I'm going to do now is when viewers start showing up, I'll give them the URL if they want to join us in this broadcast.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Thanks.
you know, people are often late, so it might be waiting for people.
Sure.
So let's go. Look. 3 viewers. You currently have 3 viewers.
Great.
Okay, so.
So basically, as Allstream comes in, welcome to.
Right.
I understand that we're looking at maybe 20 or 25 people. So.
Right. So let's go ahead and wait until we get a few more, and then we'll go ahead and start. Let me put a message up here on chat, and we can let them know. So Ed, I've just
go ahead.
More until we start. So we'll wait for those viewers to come, and then they can join us on Hangouts.
We'll join the Hangout, and we can have some of their. We can have a conversation with them in audio as well.
Yep. I posted that URL in chat so they can see that and come on and join us if they would like.
Sounds good. So we'll give it a few minutes, and then we will go through a slide presentation about Cetis, the phones, and the new product, technology, and provisioning, etc.
Yep.
So we have a few there now, 3, 4.
Yeah, we have 3 right now.
Okay. I'll just wait. I'll let you. I'll some more arrivals.
Of
course, I understand that dead air is like the bane of radio. You're not supposed to have dead air. It's bad.
Well, sing us a song, Ed. We have 7 viewers now.
Great. Okay. From Allstream.
Why don't you go ahead and just reintroduce us for those people who are just joining us.
Thanks for making time in your day to take a look at the Cetis products and meet with us. My name's Ed Klingman. I'm in product development and product management for Cetis VoIP products.
And I'm Sid Bray, and I manage support and technical answers for our products. And I'll also be having our coworker Andy join us.
Hello, everyone.
So I wonder if we should wait a little bit longer. It sounded from Device Telecom that there might be as many as 20 people showing up, and I hate to have people waiting, but I think we should give it at least a few more minutes before we just start the presentation.
Let's go ahead and wait till 1:10, and that gives everyone a nice cush time to join us here.
Yep, that sounds good.
Ed, can you go ahead and do a sound check? Some of our participants say they can't hear us on the YouTube video.
Okay, sure. Yeah, it's. I was just about to say that another 4 minutes could be a very long 4 minutes. Can people hear us at this point? Is there any feedback on that?
I've just had one person so far say they cannot hear on Hangout, so
Okay.
I'm checking in
One
with them.
second. I've got I have someone, Device Telecom. Whoop, he's hung up.
So can you give me a sound check, Ed?
Yeah. I'll So this is Ed Klingman with Cetis, and we're about to start. I think that if we can determine that we have audio flowing out through YouTube and in the Hangout, then we're going to go ahead and keep moving and start the presentation.
That sheet I had has.
Is there any?
I sent you attachment.
The email thing?
Yeah.
Is there any feedback out there in terms of whether we're?
I'm going to have Andy check on it right now, make sure he's hearing you on the live stream, and then we can get going.
Okay. I mean, I can try a different microphone if that's. So testing. And you can hear me just fine, right?
Yeah.
Okay, then it's not the mic. And we're about to start. I think that.
Okay.
Is there latency maybe? Okay. Do we have any feedback yet whether voice is operational? Hello, is there any feedback out there?
Okay. Just
Are we ready to go, or do you think that we got voice?
making sure that
So it's waiting for you for something you need to kick off.
I'm trying to figure out. Seems to be some technical difficulties here.
Is there anything on my end?
No, I don't think so. So it says it's broadcasting.
Live control room. What's that?
Live control room. Stream status is okay.
Okay.
So, okay. So they say they can hear us on YouTube. So,
They can. Okay, good. All right, well then we should move forward and keep rolling with that. So we'll start now if we think we've got the difficulties patched up. So thanks. I want to thank Allstream for showing up today and taking time out of their schedules. My name is Ed Klingman. I'm product manager for VoIP products, and I have Sid Bray here, who's in product development and support. And we want to go over the new products that they were introducing. So move to the next slide. We'll start out with who is Cetis. And we were formed through a merger of 3 telecom companies, Cytec, Telemed, 2006, and then when we acquired telephone manufacturer Teledex in 2009, the name was changed to Cetis. Over 30 years history of manufacturing and distributing hospitality telephones. There's about over 1 million of these phones are sold annually. And over the years, 7,000 channel partners have installed more than 30 million Cetis telephones at over 100,000 commercial locations around the world. To give you a quick summary of what we're going to go over today, a very quick overview of VoIP and the differences between our original 1.x generation phones, the years, and the new 3.x phones that we've begun to manufacture recently. We'll also go over some provisioning, interoperability, and support resources. So, what is voice over IP? And basically, it's a suite of technologies that allow calls and conversations to happen. Two of the key VoIP technologies are SIP, or Session Initiation Protocol, used for setting up connections between devices, and then RTP, the Real-Time Transport Protocol for audio streaming. And with this infographic over on the right, you can see an example network with telephones over Ethernet switches, a provisioning server, a network segment of a voice VLAN, got a voice gateway, voicemail, and then the Cisco PBX. So voice over IP communication in a hotel environment is going to involve the phones registering to a PBX, or a private branch exchange. And the PBX then helps one phone reach other phones. And then additional servers are usually involved, such as media servers, voicemail servers, and this is just a quick flow of phones calling into PBXs and making connections for audio streaming via RTP. So when you're connecting to the SIP PBX, Cetis require a SIP compliant PBX. IP protocols such as Mitel's MyNet or Cisco's SCCP Skinny are not supported in our SIP phones. And working connections to a PBX for the phone really require configuration PBX and then the voice over IP phone in order for everything to work and a connection to occur. And my understanding is that Allstream is working with Mitel quite a bit in terms of installing their MyVoice and their ICP solutions. And we have got companies, and definitely Mitel is right up there at the top of the list. Our knowledge base, where there is a link associated here, has many frequently asked questions. We have solution write-ups, tools, software tools documentation, as well as SIP certification configuration notes. And so if you were to click on that, you'll be able to download and view the Mitel certification. This next slide is a screenshot of the new phone with on basically a very small subset of fields necessary to make a registration to the MyVoice 8. So you can see the display name, username, authorization name, etc. These are just a few fields that are necessary for the phone action and be registered and ready to place a call on the Mitel switch. This other smaller graphic on the right-hand side shows that in the Mitel, that's a screenshot from the Mitel MyVoice, and it shows that the phones, the Cetis phones, will be provisioned as generic SIP devices. And so one of the things we want to go over is that since we do have, we've had phones of our first generation phones have been out in the field since 2008. So phone systems out there, and with hundreds of thousands of units installed, as those go to an end of life state, their final firmware from the new phones that we're going will be our new mainstay IP technology, and it offers improved provisioning methods, newer hardware, and much greater flexibility in development as we move forward. The current GA on that, the generally available firmware on that, is the 3.0.040 firmware. And if you run into these phones in the field, the firmware and the hardware between these two platforms they're completely different. And the firmware on one will not fit into the confines of the other phone. So they are different. They operate in much the same way, and the interops have all gone very well for 7 or 8 major PBX companies at this point. I guess if we don't have anyone in the Hangout, I'll keep moving. Usually when we do these presentations, we take questions throughout, but we can just, if anyone submits a question, we can present it here on the screen and talk about it. So I'd encourage anybody to do that just throughout the time we have here. So this slide is showing us the first generation phone, of which there are many out in the field, on the left-hand side. And this is, again, just the very basic information that gets used to register to a PBX. So on the left-hand side is the first generation. On the right-hand side is the current products that are moving. And they're very similar. They take very little information in order to get that registration going. And the phone generational differences that we have got now, some of the new features that we have is that the 3.x is going to have much better provisioning capabilities. And you can see that provisioning, there's a provisioning screen to your right, a screenshot that has various DHCP options, auto redirection, etc. The 3.x phones also have multifunction programmable keys, which is the screenshot directly below that, where what used to be just primarily speed dials are more programmable, where you can have a speed dial memory, hold, conference, transfer, do not disturb, and multicast paging. And we do have a question. So we have a question about auto redirection. We're going to go over that in another couple of slides. I'm going to go over it in more detail. So the other differences between these phones is that each generation utilizes different configuration files. It also utilizes different firmware. Cordless handsets are basically decked radios, and they are not compatible. So we'll move on to the next. What is a config file? And it's basically the text representation of the programming that's inside the phone that the user interface. The data is interchangeable. You can upload a config file. You could program the web user interface and export or download the config file. And so you can see that, you know, primary register, it's a one-to-one, enable, on, display name. So it makes sense out of. So provisioning is really what system integration is all about. That's the value add, and putting, you know, installing these phones and getting them to work seamlessly. And the basis of that is generally going to start with the network. You've got to configure the phone and the PBX to interoperate with one another. You have to have a network that's operational, credentials. You also have to be able to make sure that all the settings are going to be correct between and compatible between the PBX, DHCP or UDP. Are you know, what kind of DTMF are you using? Codecs, all of that. And you also have to deliver the firmware and the configuration updates. So delivering the actual files to the phone is part of provisioning. So when you're provisioning the phones, it requires programming at the beginning. As we've already shown, there's, you know, from there's maybe just the 5 for getting a basic connection. You know, you have to have the credentials, you have to know your extension number, you have to know the IP address of the PBX. But then you'll have to program speed dials, you have lines, and there's a variety of things, and it varies for every installation, as you all know. So what we generally recommend is people they log into the web UI, they program a single phone for that network environment, make sure it's absolutely functioning perfectly. And then when you export that text file, you can make duplicates of that and have that automatically get downloaded to the various phones upon boot up later. So you'll put these configuration files on a provisioning server. The configuration files and the firmware files for the phones. The server can be a TFTP, it can be HTTP or HTTPS. And there's 2 basic ways that Cetis phones can retrieve their configuration files from a provisioning server. You have a config ID file request, where the phone requests its config file in the form of a configuration ID, config ID. And then you also have a MAC address, where every phone has its individual MAC address, and it'll request that instead, or in addition to. The phone can also do requests for firmware through a file called firmware.cetis.txt. So when you're provisioning with a config ID, the idea is basically that you want to place the phone in the room. It'll power up. You listen for a prompt. You key in the config ID. The phone will then download its configuration file, programming, restart, apply, and it's ready to go. You know, obviously the first steps are creating the config files and placing them on the provisioning server. But that is the simplest way generally for people to take the individual phones into a room and place them on PoE and download the config file after you key it in. provisioning with a MAC address, it requires a little bit more planning because you have to manage the location. The MAC address in a Mitel is it's easier in a Mitel than in some, because you can just program the device to inside the Mitel to reflect a MAC address. But the MAC address config file still has to get onto the phone through the provisioning server. And back to our question, what is auto redirection? A redirect service allows the phone to send an HTTP request to a redirect server, and it's attempting to get its provisioning URL. It's looking for another server, another provisioning server to go to. So this would often be used in a cloud-based. And once the phone has its secondary provisioning URL, it can then reach its MAC address config. And if you follow through the phone booting up, going to a DHCP, I don't know where your configuration files are. You can go to the internet, go to the redirect server, and that redirect server says, yes, I do know what MAC address you are. I recognize you. And that MAC address is tied to this other server. I'm going to send you to that server, and you can download your configuration file from there. Provisioning firmware updates is done with firmware.cetis.txt. And the way file names that the phone can download and compare to its current firmware load. If the firmware listed in the file is different than the load on the phone, and the firmware is present on the server, it will go ahead and download and update or downgrade, depending on what you want to do. And this is what the syntax of that file looks like. It's very simple. You have to have a text file with the number, the correct name of the firmware that you want to do. This is maybe a little more, this is more firmware than you would usually have in any, you're only going to have 3 or maybe 4 different types of phones. So you would limit this to maybe 4 different firmware files. But if one of the phones is, if you only have one of the firmware files on the provisioning server, then only that type of phone will upgrade. So if you want, you have, this is very easy to put on the server, take off the server, and but each time the phone will boot, it will check and see, and it'll do a compare and contrast, and then download the correct firmware that's listed in this file. So that's a pretty simple and flexible way of doing firmware upgrades. And this basically maps the firmware prefixes to the various models that we have. We have at least 20 different models, and all the firmware indicates that they're going to share the same traits, the same SIP messaging, the same call control. Everything's going to work the same. When the number is, in this case, it's 3.0024. So all of these different, they might have a different prefix, but those prefixes are used to accommodate the variances in things like, is it a single line phone or is it a 2-line phone? Is it a corded phone or a cordless phone? If it has an LCD display, how many lines is that display? What's the size of it? that is pretty much the way that you could determine what firmware goes on which phone, or that it's actually just an explanation of why the firmware prefixes are different. You can tell on the user interface what actual. So how does the phone actually find and know about its provisioning server? Usually that's through DHCP options. Phone requests provisioning information from the DHCP server at the same time. So in Mitel and in most situations, DHCP option 66 has been customarily used to tell devices that you're using a TFTP server for provisioning, and this is the TFTP server's address. So usually DHCP options are used. Manually program it in. No one usually does that, but you can definitely upgrade. You can upload a configuration file that already has that information. And then also with the redirection service, the phone requests the provisioning information from our redirect service, which is provision.cetis.com. And we would need to, that requires that that an account be set up. So if you're provisioning phones and you want to use a redirect service, then you would contact us or set up an account to use to set up a redirect service so that you can upload the MAC address list of the phones that you want to provision, and then the phones will call that. They'll check that, yes, you've got a valid MAC address, and this is the server that you need to go to. And you would provide the server, the secondary server, wherever you have it hosted. And then the phone would come to the redirect server and then go make its HTTP request and grab its MAC address file from whatever server you are redirecting it to. So with all these configuration files, how do you create them? And how do you create them quickly? Because if we remember, we're going back to taking one phone that we know is gold. But we have to maybe we're installing 300 phones, maybe 600, maybe 5,000 over the course of time. You need to be able to all the good values, all the good data that you need to reproduce, and then substitute other configuration values that make that phone unique. Its extension number, maybe its speed dials, etc. We have several different tools. The one that we're shipping right now with these generator, and it is a Windows-based application and spreadsheet. It's pretty easy to use. We have a tutorial of that on our YouTube page as well. There's another tool that's being upgraded right now, and that's a Microsoft Access database tool, and that allows you to build configuration files as you use a graphical interface for building rooms, buildings, rooms, phones in those rooms, and you kind of build it in a gradual tab by tab process. Also, configuration files, there's a movement among different PBX manufacturers that is allowing configuration files to be built on the fly. And we plan on doing more ongoing development with that. Some of the examples that of PBXs that do that are 3CX, Phone Suite. BroadSoft, I believe, is starting to adopt that methodology. And some asterisk-based systems also plan to do that, where they will take a template and you can fit into that template. So that's not here today, but that is definitely something we'll be exploring with various companies. But it is a case-by-case basis. So the configuration generator is, again, it's a Windows-based tool to create configuration files en masse. It uses the imported base configuration file for settings that are not going to change between phones, such as the registration IP, the DNS settings, mostly network stuff. And then you'll use a spreadsheet to change the configuration variables that need to be custom to the phone. And then once you phones, you'll place them on the provisioning server, and the phone will go and get them. So we've got over 20 different models that are kind of combined into, we have the E series visible here. We also have an I series, an M series. We have a marquee series, which is the numbered version phones, which have been very popular over the years. So 3300 IP, the 9600 IP. All of these phones are going to be powered over standard 802.3AF power over Ethernet. And almost all of these models, some of the trim lines don't, but almost all other models that would be used in a guest room have data ports for guest connectivity. And they're all SIP compliant. So we have a quick smattering here of certifications for various SIP phones: Avaya, Mitel, BroadSoft, Cisco, Alcatel, and NEC as well. These have all been in the last 6-7 months, so they're up to date on the newest versions of, in most cases. A lot of the PBXs can make changes, biannually, and we sometimes see that, but usually not major changes. And all of these people do their test certification process in-house. So the testing gets done, and then they either verify or they have done all the testing themselves, so that things will operate very smoothly. And then they issue the interop certification from there, and creates greater confidence. Let's see. We have another to the configuration program. So the configuration programs are going to be found here at the knowledge base, the portal. And what we would recommend is that if you click on this link and you go to support.cetis.com/portal/VoIP, that you can look for solutions, you can look for the firmware and the software. There's some, and you can also search on 3.x. That's probably what you're going to want to find solutions for. We have everything prefixed with 3.x that is appropriate, since we've been, since we have a legacy of information products that goes back 10 years, we're trying to make sure that information pops out. But doing any kind of search with a prefix of 3.x will yield good results. So this is, we're at the end. which you're welcome to ask us more questions. We can go back over any of the slides if we went too quickly. But we would appreciate if you have a moment to fill out the 5 questions or so that are on the SurveyMonkey.
Hey, thanks, Ed. Let's just hang out a couple of minutes and see if we have any questions come in. The video cast is, 20 seconds or so behind. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Also, we're available throughout the week to answer questions, and we'd enjoy hearing them. Just a comment on something you said, Ed. What's the difference between, if you could say it in a paragraph, why are these phones better than the past legacy phones that we've sold and they're now coming to a conclusion of their lifespan?
Well, we've into better provisioning. We have a better development resource for making changes as we move forward. If we run into opportunities that we really want to take advantage of, if there's some technical or software that needs to be done, we're in a very good position now to make those changes rapidly. We have LLDP and 802.1x are working very well. So there's greater security, there's greater. The other part that the 3.x phones have that is interesting is the multi-programmable keys. And I know that one of those with the multicasting, there's been interest in that for a while for broadcasting via the phone.
Right. For emergency announcements and that kind of thing.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
And I'm sure there are many more things, but we've had a very good run of 10 years with one technology platform, and this is a better technology platform.
For sure.
In every respect. So, we expect a good, stable product to be the result of this development for a number of years.
Right.
We don't plan on switching up, following any specific trends in the technology. Just basically keep making it, more stable. And it's perfectly stable now, but adding, as the industry changes, as the PBXs offer greater services, making, if we can integrate into that, that will be the goal.
Right.
So
I appreciate.
So one question.
Yeah.
Do you see a concurrent transaction?
How many concurrent transaction can provision server can handle? Can you go ahead and put that up there, Ed?
Sure.
So I assume by provision server, Cetis only has responsibility for one server, and that's the redirection server, and it's might be considered a provisioning server, but really what it redirects is it redirects the request to the correct. So Setus won't host any configuration files or anything like that. I'm not quite sure how many concurrent transactions that server can take, but it's unlikely to take more than, say, 200 to 1,000 transactions at any given time. And the reason that is because you would only use the redirection server when you don't want to configure a DHCP option or some other method for the phone to get its provisioning URL. So how many concurrent transactions can that server handle? Not sure, but I'm guessing somewhere greater than hundreds of transactions at a time. how many transactions can your provisioning server handle, or the one you guys choose. That's really implementation specific, and it depends on how much hardware you have and how well the software is written. In beta, so we haven't tested how many. It is your own risk service that we provide for convenience. It does work, I know that, but I haven't tested if I boot up 1,000 phones at the same time, can it handle that? So I hope I answered that question clearly enough.
Let's see. I
Good
wonder.
question, though.
It is a good question. Yeah, that's a tough one. I know that with the Cetis redirect, I mean, since there's no data per se transferring, it's like that ought to handle a lot of transactions. But when you start, downloading firmware is a 3 to 5 meg file.
Right.
That is what you're downloading if you're doing firmware. If you're doing configuration files, then you might only be downloading
thousands of kilobytes.
Yeah, a small textual file. So it's not a tremendous load unless you're doing mass upgrades. And if you're doing mass upgrades, then generally we recommend that people try to do that, at least in a hospitality environment. You do it floor by floor, or something scheduled late at night.
Okay, Ed, we got a few more questions here. Let's go ahead and take the one about the knowledge-based server first, and I can answer that for Mahmoud.
Okay.
So what is there available to access it? Well, really, all of the solutions and everything that we have for all of our firmware, almost all of them are available openly to anyone who goes to that link that we showed on the support page. And you can also find it in the description of this video. I would say there are a few things that it might help if you register for an account, which is free and it takes no effort at all, and doesn't really collect any information other than an email address. And that is check on any tickets or help requests you've submitted. But we also accept those via email. So a lot of that's good for me to track, but it doesn't matter to you. In the future, there might be some solutions that are only available for you at your account. But again, most public solutions handle everyone, and it's not be pretty open with help for our phones, because we know that when you're installing, you need help right now. So we want to provide that help as soon as possible.
We have another question as well. Thanks, Ed. That's a great answer. So there's one here that I'm not quite sure how to answer. I think it's sort of a case-by-case type of question, and it's do you still need to configure the ARS digits for each phone? And I think digits, and I'm not sure how that fits in context. I mean, I know that in some cases, people try to they try to speed up a delay that can be built in for dialing strings, and I'm not sure if that's what this is referring to or not. There's a timeout when you're dialing. And for SIP, there's generally a timeout that's programmable. That's a couple of seconds, can be as much as 5 seconds, especially if you're dealing with international calls.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you've stopped dialing before that the phone recognizes you've stopped dialing. And again, I would ask maybe for a little bit greater clarification on this, because I'm not sure how to answer that question.
So
but there is. Go ahead.
I just looked that up, and ARS digits, automatic route selection digits, that sounds like a Mitel version of a dial plan. So most of the dial plan is handled via the PBX Now, we do have a simple dial plan usually it's used to tell the phone to send digits immediately. Say, well, after pressing 911, we want the phone to send the digits immediately. So there's a dial plan that you can make for that. But as far as configuring that for each phone, you would configure that for one phone, and then you would multiply that configuration file across all configuration files with a configuration program or with main dynamic templating that the phone system can do. So I don't think you have to configure it per.
You got cut off there for a second.
Oh, okay. So I don't think you need to configure it per se for each phone. The digital dial plan, you configure it for one phone, and then you multiply that configuration across any phones that dial plan affects. It's whatever mechanisms the PBX has for configuring advanced dial plans. Most of that's handled by the PBX or phone system.
Okay. Regarding, I'll put it up real quickly. So, do we have a sample video of configuring a SIP phone using the configuration generator? I think there is at least some.
Well, let's see if we have that. Create one using the Cetis configuration generator. Again, the configuration generator simply generates the files and makes with slight variable changes, but where things like the dial plan and speed dials all transfer across, and you don't have to manually enter those. Once you get those files configured, they still have to go on a provisioning server, an HTTP server, an HTTPS server, a TFTP server that will that when the phone requests that file will handle that file transaction. But as far as do we have a video that that shows that, I believe. Let me take a look here. Yeah, here we go. So
if I drop this this question, is it possible for us to show a link to that? Or
yeah, absolutely. Let me go ahead. You don't need to drop the question. I'll just go ahead and share my screen here and show them the link to the video. Okay, so if we take a look here, I'm not going to play the video, have some weird effects when screen sharing, but YouTube, you can go ahead and see this link right here will take us to the video. And basically, you just need to go to the Cetis Inc. Channel and then go to the SIP training playlist. So let's go back here. Not that. So if we go to YouTube, and then we go to we go to Cetis Inc. Top entry will be our YouTube channel, and we go playlists, and then Cetis VoIP phone training. Now you can also get to this link by going to our portal for VoIP, which is /portal/VoIP. And we'll have a video training link so you can get any of the most current videos. And there we go, the playlist. The one we want is the configuration generator video here, which will generate the configuration file. So pretty simple there. All right, Ed, let's go back to you here.
Okay. I wish it were easier to accept like any vocal questions or anything, but I am curious whether the first question we had was about auto redirection, and I'm not satisfied. Let's see. Oh, well, there's another question. Can we have a copy of the presentation? It's, I would say certainly, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, after we're done with this presentation, this video will be up for a while, if not permanently. But we can also send you a copy of the slides, or not even send. We can just post a copy of the slides on the support portal that you just saw, and you can find it easily. We'll probably put it on the front page or in one of the announcements so that you can find that easily and go through and see if there's any questions that you have for us.
Okay. So, and I think so. On the version 1 phones. So, needing to configure the dial plan on each phone. Do you need to do this on the 3.x phones? I wouldn't say that it's in the dial plans are about timing, and you can just set your timing to be lower. I mean, you have, if you want your delay time invite is sent, then you can take it from its default of 5 seconds and drop it down to 1 second or 2 seconds. So I think that may be just a configuration choice. Depends on what you're trying to do. But there is still the capability to configure the dial plan on the phones.
Yeah,
would you add to that?
Yeah, obviously from the understand this question, are we talking about the PBX dial plan or the dial plan on the phone itself?
I think we're talking about the dial plan on the phone.
Okay, so version 1 phones, we need to configure the dial plan on each phone.
Do you need to do that?
Obviously, to me, we never had a system where you had to physically touch every phone to configure the dial plan. You could always massively create configuration files so that once one dial plan is created, you just load that dial easily enough. But do we need to configure the dial plan on each phone? Maybe you're referring to here that some PBX, some phones have a separate dial plan configuration file. As far as the dial plan configuration file goes, we don't use multiple configuration files. However, we do allow you to use a partial configuration file, like if you wanted to highlight just the dial, load that onto a phone, we could do that. It's generally pretty easy once you generate a lot of configuration files to change something and just regenerate them. But we could also talk about, you know, easier ways of just doing certain sections. Say you had 300 phones and you just wanted to change the dial plan and you wanted to change one configuration. Did that. That's an option, and I would encourage you to, we can discuss that as a development team and see if that's feasible. I would encourage you to comment in the survey if that's something you would like to see.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah.
Again, just so everyone's clear. And you can also find that in the description of the video. Things such as this, where as a development team, we're always looking for input. Please comment on any features and other things that have really bothered you or that you see improvement in.
Again, how many? Can you tell Sid how many folks how many attendees we had?
We have 14 viewers right now. We had 16 at our max.
Okay.
So,
Well, I want to thank everybody for taking the time out again. Called doing the broadcasting when a lot of times these things are more of a give and take with given questions. We haven't used this format before. This is our first kind of broadcast using Google Hangouts, YouTube, and Google Slides. But we'd like to know whether it was good. With practice, it gets better. I think that it seems like it's a good way to get the information in front of people, and it is creating a YouTube video of this as it's happening. So that will be on our YouTube channel as well, so it can be rewatched. But from my perspective, it is a little bit difficult knowing how to pace it, because I don't know how long you needed to see these various slides without some vocal interaction.
right.
So if we don't have any other, and I don't believe we do.
Anymore.
Yeah, I don't see any new questions.
So we'll post the slideshow that Ed just put up and make it available to you guys to view. And then if you have any questions, you'll be at the support portal. You can send us an email at support@Cetis, or just open a ticket and ask whatever questions you have. Please fill out the survey, because we're trying to get a good measurement of how our support and our training needs to move on from this direction. And what you tell us will have an impact on what kind of things we can do.
Again, thanks again, and Sid Bray, and just reach out to us if there are questions or concerns, or you need more information at any time at sipsupport.cetis.com. And thanks again.
All right.
Have a good day, all.
Bye.